Last month, President Biden outlined a massive $2.3 trillion infrastructure plan to help rebuild America. The plan includes hundreds of billions of dollars to repair the nation's roads, highways, bridges, and airports, as well as providing clean drinking water, building new schools, and improving access to high-speed internet and electrical systems. But some experts say the plan has a gaping hole. They believe a lack of dedicated cybersecurity funding in President Biden's proposal leaves the U.S. vulnerable to the growing threat of hackers. Joining us now to discuss the plan is Eric Geller. He is a cybersecurity reporter at Politico. Good to see you, Eric. So, when most Americans hear the word infrastructure, they think of roads and bridges, not necessarily technology. Explain why including cybersecurity in this infrastructure plan is so important.
Well, it's really important because the infrastructure we're using today was built before any of this was really a concern, and we're now going into a phase where we're building things that are going to be with us for 50 or 70, 100 years potentially, and it's becoming increasingly digitized. So the roads that we're going to be driving on are going to be talking to our cars. They're going to be telling our cars, stay in your lane, there's an accident coming up. That's not the kind of thing that you want hackers to be able to sabotage. You can imagine what could go wrong there. It's also the case that our ports, our water distribution plants, our electric utilities, they've always had, to some degree, connections to the internet. But a lot of those companies don't have the money to secure those things. And we've certainly seen in the past, including overseas in Ukraine, how not having enough security on these facilities can lead to power outages. There was a hack of a water treatment plant a few months ago. So those are examples of the kind of problems that experts say we need to solve this on the front end, because we've seen what happens when we try to sort of bolt it on afterwards.
So the big story recently was about SolarWinds. Russian hackers believed to have exploited gaps in U.S. defenses with the SolarWinds hack last year. They have also repeatedly taken down the power grid in Iran. When I knew we were talking about this topic, the first issue that actually sort of story that came to mind was several years ago when Iranians were accused of trying to break into, I think, the technical structure of a dam in New York, and a number of Iranians were indicted. This seems like a no-brainer. At the time when we heard about the dam, the conversation was, this is the future of warfare. This is what it's going to look like. Why would the Biden administration not include that in their infrastructure plan?
Well, look, they're trying to keep that price tag as low as humanly possible, given the massive scope that they're dealing with. And when I asked the White House about this, they did say, we're going to make sure that cybersecurity is part of resilience. They have this broader concept of resilience, including resilience to climate change. So they are aware that this is a problem. I think for them, they're hoping that they can get this done as part of the money that is going out through the infrastructure bill without necessarily setting aside specific money for it. It's also the case that I don't think a lot of regular Americans, and certainly a lot of lawmakers, think about this as a specific line item that needs to be addressed separately. It hasn't yet reached the point where it is affecting us in our daily lives to the degree where policymakers actually face pressure from citizens to take this seriously as a separate issue.
So how vulnerable is the United States to a power grid hack similar to those carried out against Ukraine? And what's the administration doing to prevent it from happening?
Well, we have a few advantages. First, we have a pretty decentralized grid. We actually saw in Texas, that was actually part of the problem for them, is that this isn't one uniform system that any state can draw on when they need to. We also have a growing awareness of the problem. We have federal agencies that are really trying to help. But there are certainly vulnerabilities. I would say right now, our adversaries don't think of this as the number one thing they want to do, because the blowback would be significant. But if they wanted to, I'm sure they could find some utility out there that has something connected to the internet that shouldn't be connected. They don't have enough personnel. Maybe they got one guy who does cybersecurity, and maybe he's off that day. This is the kind of thing that these small utilities, they really are the weakest link. And I think most experts believe it's only a matter of time before we see some kind of outage. Certainly not anything on a doomsday scale, because we have some fail-safes in place. But look, even a small localized outage can be a big deal, especially if it affects something like a hospital.
Yeah, the smaller utilities, and then also the smaller municipalities. I think I remember, the Trump administration, or Donald Trump, maybe not the administration, but at least the Donald Trump, kind of asking Americans not to buy 5G from China. But 5G from China is actually, much less expensive than getting it from other places. And a small municipality with a small budget has to think of the bottom line first and foremost. So, the federal government can make suggestions, but I don't know how they can sort of force small municipalities or smaller utility companies to spend a chunk of their budget on this stuff. I wonder if that is one of the biggest challenges, or how you would sort of list the big challenges when it comes to incorporating cybersecurity into new infrastructure.
That's absolutely a huge challenge, and we are seeing some federal agencies, including the FCC, try to use their regulatory power to say, in the case of the FCC, what they've said is, hey, if you use our subsidy money to build out a telecom network in a rural area, for example, you are not allowed to buy equipment from Huawei or other Chinese companies. You have to use equipment from companies that are based in friendly countries, essentially. So there are some levers that the government can pull on here. But listen, if you are a small utility and you provide service to a very poor area and you do not have a lot of money, China and Chinese equipment is very attractive to you. And if the government says you can't buy it, that's a huge problem. Now, Congress did appropriate some money last year to help subsidize better equipment purchases, but it's going to be a massive effort. And that does get back to even SolarWinds in terms of what we call a supply chain attack, which is basically attacking something that you rely on indirectly as a way of getting to you. And certainly our telecom infrastructure is something that we indirectly rely on all the time. And if you can spy on that, you can see what we're talking about in large part. So there are these huge problems that the government has to deal with that it is just now getting up to speed on.
Eric, as you know, earlier this month, the Department of Justice announced it authorized the FBI to go into infected Microsoft Exchange servers and delete malware without notifying the server's owners until after the fact. The DOJ is now considering using the same approach to fight ransomware. The move has brought up some privacy concerns. So I guess the bigger question is, do benefits of security and protection outweigh those concerns?
I think you're going to find that it's case by case. So for ransomware, for example, if the FBI reaches into a hospital network and turns off basically the ransomware so that that hospital can unlock its files, is not going to be reinfected by that same group, that could be a huge benefit. We saw, with the Exchange server situation that you were talking about, people might have patched their systems, but as long as that piece of code was still there, the hackers could climb right back in. So when the FBI turned that off, that potentially saved a lot of companies huge financial problems, perhaps even national security problems, depending on the companies. What we're seeing right now is this broader debate about, should the FBI be required to tell us? Should they even be required to go in? That's not a question that's been settled yet. We see this privacy security conversation in other areas too, including some people might remember the Apple FBI fight a few years ago about the terrorist iPhone in San Bernardino, California. We're having these conversations now because people are just waking up to the fact that their own personal privacy and security is affected by these things that are happening essentially inside their computers that they've never had to care about before.
It's a really fascinating topic, so I'm really glad you joined us. Eric Geller, thank you very much.
Thank you.